And welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. This is Dan Siegel, joined by Matt Mlodzinski and Ariel Puterman, doing our mid-season college basketball awards and superlatives. And let's start right at the top. Let's start with our player of the year in the mid-season. In my opinion, there's two guys that this could be. I'm curious your guys' thoughts. First, we'll throw it to Matt.
Look, I think there's one guy it can be, and that's Johnny Broome, right? I mean, here's a guy that literally is the top player on the top team in the country. I've ranked Auburn number one in the country, even when people were ranking Tennessee. And that's no shot to Tennessee at all. I just think Auburn has clearly the best resume. And Broome is a guy that, if you've watched college basketball, you've known who he is over the past couple of years, right? Like, this is no surprise that he's being able to do this. He's improved his trajectory year after year. It's just that this year he has taken it to a whole nother level, right? He's no longer just the guy that can make plays inside the post and maybe give you a little bit from outside. He's doing it from all over the place. And I just think it's a combination of the stats that he's putting together and when you watch the games, what he's been able to do on the court. To me, there's no other competition. I'm curious to see if anyone else has someone different, because to me, it's Broome and that's it.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cooper Flag could make a case late. He's really starting to blossom into an elite player, and Duke will be a 1 seed at the end of the year. But I have to agree, it's Johnny Broome, and there's really no one else. Just what he's able to do on both sides of the ball, both scoring, rebounding, passing's been really important to his game this year, getting his teammates open, and that's why they've been so successful. And then defensively, he's averaging almost 3 blocks a game, which is pretty incredible for what he's doing on the offensive end. There's the production on both sides. I think there's one guy, and it's Broome.
So my pick was Broome. I agree that he is the best candidate, the best player on the best team, and pretty much the best overall statistical output. However, I do think there is a case, actually, maybe not as far as the actual awards will go at this rate, but as far as if I were voting, for Eric Dixon from Villanova. We don't know how good Villanova is yet, but Eric Dixon is putting up some absurd numbers: 25.7 points per game. 47.2 from beyond the arc as a 6'8" big. That is pretty absurd. Broome, just a measly 19 and 11. But my point is, he is single-handedly the reason why Villanova is on the comeback. People are starting to respect Villanova. They're winning games. They were looking really bad in the beginning of the year, even with him putting up his numbers. But the fact that he has managed to win with Kyle Neptune as his head coach, which is I'm just so down on him, Kyle Neptune, and I think that it's single-handedly a Eric Dixon effort. He has the best statistical output on the year overall. Auburn, on the other hand, has 7 really good offensive players, so I still think they're a top 5 team without Johnny Broome. Villanova's one of the worst teams in Power Conference basketball without Eric Dixon. So that's my case for Eric Dixon. I do have Johnny Broome. I think there is a legitimate discussion to be made, though. Those are really my two options. Maybe you could throw Cam Jones into the mix, but he's nowhere near those two. But I think we're allowed to have a debate for Eric Dixon. I don't think it's automatically Johnny Broome.
I think if they win the Big East, there's a strong case. Right now, though, they're not even a top 25 team, in my opinion. It's hard to give the player of the year to a not top 25 team in the country.
Yeah, but then I could argue it's the player of the year, not the player on the team of the year. You know what I'm saying?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Let's move on, though. We got freshman of the year. This one, I'll throw to Matt first. There's a really good freshman class, but I think there's one that stands out.
Yeah, kind of like Ariel mentioned. I mean, Cooper Flag, you can consider him for midseason player of the year if you want to. And like you mentioned, he's coming on more, right? Every freshman is going to have struggles from the start. No freshman is going to figure it out right away. Cooper Flag certainly showed his skills at the beginning of the season, but as we've moved further, into the beginning of conference play and whatnot, Flag is literally Duke's top player in every category, right? He's just doing it all for the Blue Devils. Like you mentioned, this is a team that is looking like a 1 seed. They've got 5 quad 1 wins the last time I checked, if people even care about the net rankings anymore. And Cooper Flag is a big reason why, pretty much the main reason why, right? If Cooper Flag was 75% of what he is, we wouldn't even be talking about Duke right now. This guy has done it all for the Blue Devils. He's making highlight plays. Again, it's kind of like Broome. You can look at the stats, but then when you even watch him in person, it just makes it even better. Cooper Flag is the runaway freshman of the year.
Yeah, I agree. definitely the winner. I think Kasparas Yakashonis is a little bit closer than people think, especially when it comes to runway. I think the media narrative will push Flag way ahead of him, which is fine. That's just how things work. And Flag deserves it absolutely, like you said, leading his team in every single category, which is pretty insane for a team that's a 1 seed and that has the talent that Duke has. But yeah, right now it's Flag. I think Yakashonis could show a little bit of fight, but Illinois just won by like 50 against Penn State without him. So give me Flag for the winner there.
Yeah, I appreciate the Jack Lucianis shout out. I also think Dylan Harper was kind of in the mix, even though Rutgers was so bad. It's not his fault that they have like 2 Big Ten players. But I thought Dylan Harper was in the mix before. He's kind of been banged up and not really playing much the last 2 or 3 games. So that definitely hurt his case. Although seeing Dylan Harper in person was awesome. This freshman class is just so loaded. Like we have Newell from Georgia, Trey Johnson from Texas, Jeremiah Fears, Oklahoma. Like a lot of these guys would be normal freshman of the year candidates, but I think finally we're going to have like a real one and done college class that's going to come into the NBA and make their mark immediately, which is it's good for North American basketball, which has kind of been falling behind a little bit. But I guess, I mean, we kind of already mentioned a bunch of these guys, so we could go through these really quickly, but All-Americans, Matt, who are your 5 in terms of midseason guys on your All-American teams?
Yeah, obviously I have Brew and Flag on there. That goes without saying that. I've got Cam Jones on there. You mentioned him. I mean, arguably the best bucket getter in college basketball. I've got Eric Dixon as well. It feels wrong to have 2 Big East players on this first team, by the way, because the Big East has been really down this season. But, like, how do you really keep Cam Jones and Eric Dixon off of it? Even if you don't have them on the first team, they've got to be on the second team because they've just been that good. And my 5th and final one is Mark Sears. And that might be a little bit of a surprise because he's not really shooting the ball at a very high rate. But it's just the fact that he's averaging 4.5 assists. He's still putting up great numbers. And again, on a deep Alabama team where Sears isn't out there playing 40 minutes a game, stat padding, if you will. He's only playing about a little over 30 minutes a game, still averaging close to 20 points. I just think that the way that he's done that and the way that Alabama's been playing, again, as a Final Four contender, he's my 5th and final one. But there's a lot of other guys you could put there.
Yeah, getting that 5th one was hard. I agree with that. I have Broom, Flag, Jones, and Dixon as well. I feel like those are pretty much locks at this point. Dixon could drop out of Villanova, goes into a free fall.
Yeah.
But those other 3 are pretty much locked in. I went with Chaz Lanier as my 5th right here. Tennessee, former 1 seed. Obviously, they lost to Florida, but he's averaging almost 20 points a game for that team, a team that really needs him out there to provide that scoring bump. They have a lot of great defensive players, but what's made them so dangerous this year is Chaz Lanier's offensive explosion. He averaged about the same amount last year at North Florida, and usually with these mid-major guys, we don't really see that translate. Usually we see a little bit of a drop in scoring just because of the harder competition, but that hasn't been the case for Lanier, and he's been super important to this team and for sure worthy of that first team right now.
Yeah, for my 5th guy, there are a couple guys I considered. I considered John Tanji because he's been great for Wisconsin. Like all of a sudden, Wisconsin has an elite offense putting up 100, 110, 115 points. Like where the heck did that come from? I actually went with Braden Smith from Purdue. I think that he's really impressed me. And in a way, I saw this take on Twitter and I completely agree with it. The fact that he is no longer playing with Zach Edey, obviously he's no longer getting like the quality of 3-point wide open shots that he was getting before, but it's more freeing for him to totally like show off his full game. And I thought his numbers would drop off at least from an efficiency standpoint from 3, but it really hasn't. He's still been an elite, efficient 3-point shooter. He's averaging nearly 9 assists per game. So Braden Smith is going to be my 5th guy, but the rest, yeah, it's Flag, it's Jones, it's Dixon, it's Broom. And that is a real All-American 5. Like I hate when you put like 3 bigs and like 2 wings. Like that's actually like a team you could actually see on the court. So yeah. I appreciate that sentiment right there. Let's talk coaches though. This Coach of the Year award, it's always difficult because you want to kind of judge the coaching job, not necessarily just the team that overperformed the most. So what are we thinking for midseason Coach of the Year watch?
Look, I'm going to keep it simple, and this might shock you, wink, wink. It's Shaka Smart, right? You lose Oso Ighodaro. You lose Tyler Kolek, both to the NBA. You don't bring in a single transfer, and you're arguably the top 2 seed going for a 1 seed at this point in time. I mean, Marquette has done it all. Yeah, you got Cam Jones, but you've had to bring other guys up. You've had to just – I saw a stat the other day, and this just goes to Shaka Smart's coaching, right? Because he lost a little bit after he went to Texas and things didn't really work out, right? He was no longer the next great thing since sliced bread. But in the last 3 years, 8 players have started for Marquette. 8 different players have started for Marquette over the last 3 years. Talk about a guy who doesn't care about the transfer portal. He's just going to say, I'm going to bring in my freshmen. I'm going to continue to make them better year to year, and I'm going to continue to be one of the top teams in the Big East. And Marquette is better than they were last year. You could make that case. I mean, they're 14-2. Last year, they lost 10 games. Are they going to lose 10 games this year? I'm not really sure. Could be because the Big East is even worse than it was last year. But I don't know. They just look like a team that they're clicking on all cylinders. Sure, they've got their All-American, but Shaka Smart is doing great things with little resources compared to other coaches.
Yeah, that's a good pick, Matt. I'm going to go with the safe pick here. It's going to be Bruce Pearl, best coach, best team. And you could say, yes, they have a lot of talent. It makes sense that they're doing this well. But they were the preseason 11, which isn't bad, but it's not like people expected them to be the far and away best team or even a top 3 team with that ranking. And right now, they're just crushing teams, and they're beating good teams as well. They've beaten Houston, Iowa State, UNC, Memphis, Ohio State, Purdue, and Texas. And that's just so far. We're only on January 10th, and everyone knows how hard the SEC schedule is. So the fact that they've played all these teams and they've come out with 1 loss, and that only loss being the Duke at Cameron Indoor, I think it shows a lot about how good of a coach he is, how calm and poised he is, how he's able to win in any environment. You saw he won Maui, which was the toughest environment of the season so far from a neutral standpoint. He's won a bunch of big road games as well. So that comes down to coaching, and I think he absolutely deserves that right now.
Yeah, I think both of those are reasonable picks. This one, not a straightforward decision. I went with Dusty May from Michigan, first-year head coach for the Wolverines, and completely turned them around from they were pretty horrendous last year. Now they're top 25 in the AP poll. I believe they just came in at 24th this past Monday. I really like the way he's handled the 2 7-footers on the court at the same time, having Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden in like pick and rolls together with Danny Wolf as the ball handler. I mean, the way he's been creative with using Danny Wolf has been kind of tremendous. And I've really appreciated that as like a basketball fan. He's really maximized what he could do with not a traditional, I guess, prototype of a roster. So Michigan is definitely a team that's performing well above expectation, and that's because of first-year head coach Dusty May. Darian DeVries for West Virginia, also a similar sentiment, like first-year head coach doing really well. Greg Gard for Wisconsin, I feel like is a reasonable pick. Do you want a couple mid-major picks? You could go Ben McCollum from Drake. We've talked about him. Eric Olin from UC San Diego. They're 13-2. So those are a couple guys, but ultimately I went with Dusty May. And speaking of mid-majors, let's talk about mid-major players. Who is your mid-major player of the year? By the way, at CBB Review, we define mid-majors as basically the non-power conferences and non-Gonzagas of the world.
And real quick, Dan, I want to throw Mark Pope in there as well before we move on, because that's a guy, too, that just taking over Kentucky the way he has, I think he deserves some flowers. I'm going to College of Charleston with Ante Brzovic. I'm probably saying that name wrong. I haven't watched Brzovic. I haven't watched a lot. I've watched some College of Charleston games, but more so at the beginning of the season, in the early season tournaments in November. But you just still look at what he's been able to do, right? He can take over games. I mean, when I watched him in those tournaments, I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay, like, sure, it's a coaching change. It doesn't seem to matter because College of Charleston has a star, and they're a program that seems to put out really good teams. I don't know if they've had a star like this in the past couple of years. It always seems like they're a deep team. They're coached well. Well, now they've got their guy, and there's a lot of guys you could go with, but just knowing that this is someone that, I mean, he's just like a matchup nightmare, to be honest. Like, at a mid-major level, it's hard to find matchup nightmares. A lot of times it's a guard who can take over scoring and he can light it up from 3. It's a little bit different when you've got a guy like him. So that's my mid-major player of the year.
Yeah, Dan, you talked a little bit about Ben McCollum as a potential coach of the year option. Well, I'm going to go with one of his players as the mid-major player of the year right here. I'm going to go with Bennett Sturts. He's been unbelievable this year for Drake. Over 17 points a game, 6 assists, 2.5 steals. And it seems like every big game he plays, he gets better. We saw him hit that big 3 to win the game against Kansas State. He had big games against Miami, against Vanderbilt. And then a couple of conference games. They've been off to a little bit of a rocky start, but even in those games, he had 30 against UIC in that loss. So he's been unbelievable. Big reason why Drake is as good as they are, and he absolutely deserves that award right now.
Yeah, we do include Memphis in our mid-majors, so I'm going to go with PJ Haggerty. I think he's really elevated the ceiling of this Memphis team. Memphis looks a lot better than they have in years past, and I know those are famous last words because Memphis tends to fall off down the stretch of American play, but I think this team, due to PJ Haggerty and his numbers, is looking even better than they did at this point last year. He is averaging 22 points per game. So I'm going to go with PJ Haggerty. Tyson Degenhart for Boise State I also considered. Sebastian Thomas for URI, really elevating the URI Rams, who have really surprised in the A10 so far. A guy I saw live, Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa for Columbia. Might see him make some noise in the tournament as Columbia is projected to win the Ivy League. And then one more guy I wanted to say. Did you know, by the way, that the leading scorer in the nation, tied with Eric Dixon, plays for UW Green Bay? Do you know that?
Well, he hasn't played in like a month, but yes.
Anthony Roy.
I don't think Doug Gottlieb deserves to be anywhere near any awards, so I'm gonna have to say that that's a bad pick, Dan.
Yeah, so I'll stick with Haggerty in that case, but those are just some guys I wanted to mention. I know Roy hasn't played in a while, but in terms of scoring average, he's still on that leaderboard. Let's move on, though. Sixth man of the year. This one is difficult because it's got to be, in my opinion, somebody who doesn't really start, right? Like somebody who doesn't like rotate in and out of the lineup like they are a true sixth man. So not every team has one, but what is your take?
I went with Aiden Holloway, and he hasn't started a single game this year. He's upped his averages. The impressive part about Aiden Holloway to me is, and you saw flashes last year of how great he could be when he was at Auburn. But now that he's at Alabama, the efficiency is just totally different. And sure, he's not going out there putting up, 15 points a game or anything like that. He's averaging about 10 a game. But just how efficient he's been able to be for, again, a stacked Alabama team where guys, they rotate in and out. But Aiden Holloway, to me, has been just super impressive in what he's been able to bring to the floor in, again, 20 minutes of game time, averaging 10 points per game. He's a crucial part of this Alabama team. And, hey, props for transferring from one great SEC school to another. It may not have worked out, but it seems like it has for him.
Not even just another SEC school, their biggest rival, going from Auburn to Bama. Bold decision was paid off, like you said. I'm finally going to go with the Big 12 guy here. I'm surprised no one's really said anything about the Big 12, and I guess for a reason, but it's Curtis Jones from Iowa State. He is actually leading the team in scoring right now, 16.6 points a game on a team that's number 3 in the country and probably one of the most underrated teams in the country, which is crazy to say about a number